Okay, we will go ahead and get started. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the May 2022 listening sessions for the California Truth and Healing Council. We have general listening sessions this week, with the first taking place yesterday and the second taking place today from 6 to 7:30. My name is Christina Snyder, and I'm a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band Pomo Indians and the Tribal Advisor for Governor Gavin Newsom. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the land I'm joining you from is the ancestral homelands of the Patwin peoples. I'm now going to briefly walk through some of the logistics for today's session. First, we are recording this listening session, and it's available for public participation via Zoom and dial-in. The recording and summary notes will be available on the CTHC meeting page and blog when they're ready. For those interested in following the council, ongoing updates, including listening session recordings and the listening session summary documents, are available at the California Truth and Healing Council updates blog at catruthandhealing.com. You can also get updates for events by following the Governor's Office of the Tribal Advisor on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Additional details, including meeting dates, agendas, and background information, are available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. If you've not already done so, we'd appreciate if you could update your name and let us know who you are. And as we get into the discussion portion of today's session, we'd appreciate if those who are comfortable could go on camera. We're going to start with brief introductions of those of you who have joined us, and then, as always, we'll dive into a quick overview to get everyone up to speed on recent updates, and then we'll go into the listening and discussion portion of today's convening. If you'd like to speak at any point, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. If you're not using the Zoom app, you should be able to raise your hand using the app controls, but you can also use Alt-Y in Windows or Option-Y on Mac to raise or lower your hand. If you've dialed in, you should be able to raise your hand by pressing *9. You may also email written comments to info@catruthandhealing.com at your convenience. Now, before we begin, I'd like to remind participants that all of our council members, council staff, and many of you are members of the population seeking collective healing. So I ask that you engage with the council, our office, and each other with respect and with your whole heart and healing mindset. Many of us doing this work are navigating systems that were not built for us to make change that was never contemplated. This in itself takes an enormous amount of emotional integrity, and we're all doing our best to make strides in these spaces. So thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to hand it off to Councilmember Harper if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, Open Mikintosh. Greetings, everyone. Meawe Joan Harper. I am a member of the Southern Pomo and Coast Miwok people of Sonoma and Marin County. And my tribe is the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria. And I'm happy to be here to listen to all that you have to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. And I saw Councilmember Siscon, if you'd like to say a few words, but if you don't want to, you can also stay off camera. Okay, and then I think that's the council members I've seen. We also have Michael Park on from my office. And if you would like to meet with us or discuss anything outside of the context of this meeting, or if you have any follow-up questions, you can feel free to directly message Michael and we can try to set up a time to do some follow-up. So if anyone else would like to introduce themselves to the group, we ask when you do give discussion and when you introduce yourselves to the group, we do prefer if folks could go off camera if you're comfortable doing so, just so that we can have more of a discussion format. Please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourselves, or if you want to say a few words, please feel free to do so at this time.
Homakini, Shelley Covert, Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan Tribe. Thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you and welcome. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves to the group or say a few words? And if you'd like to and you prefer, you can also introduce yourself in the chat. Or say anything and provide resources in the chat as well.
Teddy Simon, pronoun she, her. I'm the Indigenous Justice Advocate at the ACLU of Northern California and a member of the Navajo Nation. After updates, I would be really curious to hear kind of people's reflections and thoughts on the federal Indian boarding school report that was released last week, as well as a hearing in the House on House bill to create a Truth and Healing Task Force specific to federal Indian education policies. But I think there's a lot of overlap in some ways with the work of this council.
Thank you, Teddy. Always good to see you. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves to the group? Or if you have any thoughts or reflections at this time on that report, that's fine too.
Hello, Christina and everyone. My name is Fred Briones. I'm an enrolled tribal member at the Big Valley Rancheria Band and Pomo Indians in California. I'm in Washington right now for a conference, the Center of Bioplastics and Biocomposites. I'm a chemist and I have an MBA, and I run a national nonprofit with tribes located in Montana, North Dakota, and Minnesota. And we're a nonprofit organization also. And we're really focused on our hemp fiber, not marijuana, because my tribe has a marijuana factory. Yes, we do. But the tribes in the north are focused on hemp. And the hemp is then used for manufacturing of auto parts and plastic replacements, carbon sequestration, and we start jobs on Indian land. But that is the hemp fiber of the modern world and this age of climate change. And I always step back and I tell the tribes that the leader is from California, how we always have been in our ways. And it goes back to the culture and their religion, where they migrated at one point and they followed the red shell in the sky. The red shell in the sky to us is a red abalone. And if their religion, the Sioux, the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwe, and when you see them on the TV, they have that abalone shell and they're burning the sage and they're smudging. Remember that red abalone comes from California. And I like to share just traditional stories like that because a lot of our culture was lost and it was stolen from us. And to bring back, we must tell those stories to heal. So at my place, I'm a traditional basket weaver, where in our religion, that was our tooling to talk to the spirits. And when you harvest basket material, you're always on your knees and on the ground and pulling weeds, pulling roots, cleaning. And that positioning there, if you look at other religions, that is the position of prayer. So as a basket weaver from California, I'm always in that position, talking to the spirits, making our baskets, and then most important, going to the roundhouse. And I'd like to invite you all to my roundhouse. It's at the Big Valley Rancheria. Our dances are in May, the first week in May, and the first week in October. So you're all invited to our roundhouse to heal and just to feel good and embrace the song and the culture that hasn't changed for over 10,000 years. So I'd like to invite you all to heal. Okay, so as we journey, please one day you come, and with our organization also, we can provide hopefully scholarships for you to travel, because traveling is very expensive. So on that individual level, I like to just get to know you, because you're from California or you're in Indian country and you're not going anywhere. So let's make some good relationships. So thank you.
Thank you. Louise, would you like to?
Sure, thank you. To say Nishmat, Kiel Kitu Kanam Shamasana Tawibizi. Aziapamiam Chakpa Samuatas, Efehetan Aloni Costano and Esalen Nation, Efehetan, the Greater Monterey Bay Area. So we are, I am the tribal chairwoman for Aloni Costano and Esalen Nation. We are the indigenous people of Monterey County, known as the Monterey Band of Monterey, as my grandfather was identified by CTHC in 1906, the only family to be identified by name at the Sur Rancheria. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Charlie, did you want to introduce yourself and say a few words?
Yes, I'm just happy to be here. I'm really glad for the work that you're doing. I'm proud of the way that you're handling everything going forward. I wouldn't really thank Fred for his introduction and what he had to say. So I'm Susquehanna Intertribal is based in the Putwin Territory in the Onisati. Susquehanna means wet and green. It was a village at the southern part of Napa that was being desecrated in 1972 for a freeway putting in. And so the organization formed there in 1972 and actually was the founding organization for the Native American Heritage Commission. We do have a land base in Pope Valley, which is also still Putwin Territory. And we just got permission from the USDA to start producing hemp. So I'm really curious and wanting to interface with that because I think we can look at our healing, but really moving forward, how we can bring in help to bring the earth back into balance. And I think as we move away from oil produced products, plastics that are, polluting us, that hemp is really the solution to that. So I'm really wanting to connect and hope that becomes a movement also in California. I think that might be, I don't know if it's legal yet. We did have to get special permission from the federal government to do that. So it's a prototype. It'll be a small little project, but we're hoping to develop it into a commercial project also.
That's great. Very exciting. I thought it had been legalized under the Farm Bill, but maybe it's kind of like highly regulated or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think, sometimes when things get legalized, it still takes a while till you can actually do it. Just like with the Religious Freedom Act, I think that was signed in 1976. And in the 92, we were still having to deal with that, to when we started doing public gatherings, Native American public gatherings here in Napa. I always had to carry that with me, the copy of that declaration to show the police, or it was mostly the police or the FBI that we had to deal with when we were wanting to do public ceremony, to show that we have the Religious Freedom Act had been passed, under the Carter administration, and that it was legal for us to do that. And the police should be protecting us instead of, and so that took, what was that, almost 30 years before it was actually being practiced. So I don't know, I want to research more about that. We're excited though about going forward.
Very exciting. And I think it's also kind of a good thing to kind of think all about as an undercurrent to all of this work is passing a law only does so much. The enforcement, the funding, the regulation, the implementation is all necessary for it to actually be carried out, kind of like with the eagle feather issues that are happening with graduation, which is probably going to be happening right now and is happening right now. We've passed multiple laws in California that secure that right. And really, those are only as good as the enforcement and understanding and knowledge of those laws. And so what happens is kids get things taken out of their hair, they get caps removed, they get regalia taken, and they have the right to wear it under multiple federal or multiple state laws, but they have to sue to actually get any sort of recourse. And by then they've already been embarrassed. They've already had a situation where they've been stripped of that right. So just thinking about how do we make the laws that are intended to protect these kind of practices, cultural expression, how do we make sure that they're implemented and that people know about them?
Well, I'd like to share one with the group that I'm working on right now. And it's really focused on California, how they're banning plastics. And have you seen the Attorney General? He is subpoenaing the plastic industry. So now the tribes that own land on the coast have the opportunity to set up their lands where they could potentially sue if plastic pollution comes on the beach. See, a lot of areas, it's not on your beach, like in my beach up in Fort Bragg, it's not there yet. But when it's in Oregon, it's in Washington, and the state of California is making these movements now, policy against the plastic industry. And this is where hemp also is the replacement in tribal communities with their casinos. they go through so many single-use plastic items, it could be made from hemp. And that's the research and development that we're doing. But back to the beaches and the shores, what the tribes could do is pass laws that if plastic pollution comes on your beach, you sue. That's how you make money. Don't forget that, tribe. That's how you do that. Because even right now, you see signs on the road, $1,000 fine for littering. So think now, we got to think of ways how to use the system against them, their ways, their laws. So as a tribe, a big collective in the whole state of California, something like that, I really wish would come out of here. Yeah, just something I've been working on, thinking of trying to make a platform and movement on that. So maybe we can in time. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Just to point to the chat, there's been some intros in the chat and then also some resources, very helpful resources from Teddy about the eagle feather issue. And then also an event that will be taking place in Yokut's lands. So very, very cool. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves to the group at this time? Or say a few words? Okay. Go ahead.
Could I say one more word about freedom? Because Madonna Feather, I know she's been coming to these meetings and she's like one of my nieces, and she worked with the Santa Rosa, Sonoma County School District and made that a legal thing, that the Native children could have their feather or any part of the regalia that they wanted. And then she did a presentation to the Napa Valley Unified School District. And it turns out that they had made a similar change, but they never told us about it. I guess last year they had changed it, but they never released it. And so when we were making the presentation, the assistant to the superintendent of the school board said, "Oh no, we passed that last year." And I said, "Who did you inform?" So that's that sort of that follow-up. But then now we're informed, the Native, so that it's legal, and it does almost have to come down to the city or county level to justify those things. Because we can do all of that stuff now in Napa, but the graduation thing was still an issue. So now we know that got cleared up.
So it's just Native people educating constantly. But it is good to see that some of the laws are changing. And it seems like too, that a lot of the efforts are happening at the local level. There is, just for awareness, because I don't know how publicly available a lot of these updates are. There was a change, I believe, that got passed. I need to double check. I think it's passed and not just a bill. That also allows for kids to take time off for cultural purposes. Oh, good. Teddy's nodding. So just in case people weren't aware of that, if you have ceremony and things like that, your child can leave school, and it's not, it shouldn't be used against them that they have to take time for ceremony or other things throughout the year. Ken?
Good evening. Ken Woodrow, Waukesha Indian Tribe. I'm glad somebody put up there about my sister tribe, the Wakchumnees, having their gathering, Go Native. I'll be there. I guess my whole thing, just recently got a letter from the federal government. They want to know my response to the boarding schools. And, 20 of our tribal members went there, be it Riverside or Stewart in Nevada. And we discussed this before, all three different branches, county, state, and federal government were pretty much responsible for us, the unrecognized Indians, funded by a federal program to go to school outside the state. I know I'm getting serious too quick, but I asked you before about federal recognition, our state recognition, and you said the governor could not do that. But you also said it had to be a legislation process. These are the same legislatures that put bounties on our head in the 1800s. So I'm trying to, in my limited resources, trying to understand. You also talked about Public Law 280, which I'm an heir to, an allotment land and an Indian homestead. They weren't just given out to any Indian. they're giving out to Indians that was supposed to be a reservation. Ours goes from Kings River to Queen to Lone Pine. You know, that's several million acres. And every law I see shows that we are fairly recognized. You know, it's just when they reorganized in 34, we were still a historical tribe. You know, we have documentation that we're still doing tribal business, be it, you know, removal of individuals that did something against the tribe. We had special agents come in from, you know, Washington, D.C. to watch the court case, and they said it was a justified killing. So all this records, I have a 72 judgment, goes back to the 28 applications. We have the signature of a treaty. When are we gonna, you know, to me, the state needs to do something. The state is the responsible party here. The genocide was from the state. It wasn't from the federal government. They held back. They let the state do what they do. You know, we couldn't run nowhere. We couldn't go nowhere. So I guess I've been waiting a long time for something like this to come up. You know, also Gaming 1A, when we passed that legislation, when they got approved by a voter, we thought California Indian tribes that are not recognized were going to get some sort of funding. Then the state changed the definition. California Indian tribes with no casinos. So, you know, it's great the UC system opens the door for the federally recognized tribes. It's great that Graydon's doing for the unrecognized tribe, but I don't think it's Graydon's responsibility when the state's held accountable. I mean, this is the whole purpose of this, is to talk about the genocide. So I'll leave it alone. I just keep bringing it up at every meeting. And you said legislation has to go through a process. Why are other states like Columbia, North Carolina, how couldn't they have state recognition? And we're supposed to be so advanced in California, and we have extra money in the budget. What's wrong with state recognition? Because we don't want to cut into the federal recognized tribes money, because that's the problem. Once you get recognized, then you're cutting into funding that is very small. So I'll leave it at that. The question is, you know, can we get state recognition? Can we get a proclamation that gives us a foothold above AB 52 or SB 18? You know, right now, like you said, the Farm Bill brings it right back. I don't have a say-so in our traditional areas because I'm not a Section 116 tribe, even though it's a village. Red Rock mourners are there. We know there's a burial there, but we can't even monitor our own village. That's what hurts. And, you know, and it's being paid by the Farm Bill. So anything could help. State recognition would help. And we could talk about the boarding schools. You know, we got every individual tribe has, you know, members that went there. And when I read the documentation I got from the boarding schools, it wasn't a nice place. You know, it was not. And I got my 20 members of the tribe that went there. So they pretty much just scooped us up at the county level and threw us at the state, and the state just moved us to Nevada or Riverside. So sorry for being so long, but I just needed to get it out. Hopefully something can come of this. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And again, if anyone has any suggestions about someone who might be a good fit to lead that specific issue area and actually do the deep dive, do the research, do kind of the legal mechanisms that might be available and the options, we're completely open to thinking about how to navigate that. And we're kind of internally talking to some people. But if anybody has ideas about that, would love to get those recommendations. Any other folks want to introduce themselves before we go into some updates? Moke?
Hello, Christina. This is Moke Simon, Tribal Chairman, Middletown Rancheria, the Pomo Indians. We're Kotsa Tao people. Many blocked out Moke Simon. Moke. I'm a Northern California tribal leader. I've been tribal chairman for 24 years for the Middletown Rancheria. also been elected to the Lake County Board of Supervisors here in Lake County, the first native elected in Lake County's history. So I appreciate all the words that have been said. We need to talk about that trauma that's in the past. It's a reality. We need to educate, just as you said, Christina. And the reason I chimed in today was just I had time. I apologize, I haven't been on more, but ending up a day. And I thought one issue I'd like to talk about for myself is for California to recognize the 18 unratified treaties that were signed between 1851 and 1862, specifically to the 1851 treaty that was signed here in Lake County. I think McKee for the federal government is one of the folks, but you know, when I look back at the history and everything that's done in California, you know, just the stories and the stuff and the documentation we can read upon that, not only was, you know, that a way obviously to have us sign away our traditional lands, but in some of that, when you read through the history, you know, they brought in Spanish translators to talk to the tribal, you know, communities, and you know, there's an X mark on a piece of paper, and you know, so it just is for the 7 nations here in Lake County. There are 2 treaties. I think it's the O Treaty and the P Treaty that were signed. But I really think just proclamations and recognitions of those are there. I know they're archived. I know it's sensitive because of the lands we had. We're so, you know, rich in resources. You know, understanding, you know, I don't understand. Well, I know why it happened, because they were rich in resources and we had to be eradicated from the lands. So I want to bring that up. It is something that's near and dear to my heart, and that fight that we're all going through, whether you're unrecognized, recognized, gaming tribe, non-gaming tribe. It's the trauma that needs to be told and the atrocities that happened to us. So, you know, I don't have enough time to always be on these things, and you know, I'm kind of walking in 2 worlds, and you know, attempting to always kind of bring our brothers and sisters here in Lake County farther ahead, but throughout the state. And so I just appreciate that these conversations are happening. I'll chime in when I can, and I just wanted to introduce myself to everyone. And I see our neighbors in Napa working hard to do what they need to do. I know that here in Lake County, hemp is an opportunity. We did pass an ordinance. I know I was able to work on that. So anyway, Moke Simon, Tribal Chairman, Middletown Rancheria, and also District Supervisor. And I will say, here in Lake County, I'm proud to serve on the only board in the country that I know of that has 2 natives representing on it, which is E.J. Crandall, Eddie Crandall from the Robinson Rancheria, which is also Pomo. So proud to have that opportunity and that distinction. And hopefully we'll continue to move forward and see more of that throughout the counties. We're here, we're never going anywhere. We're always going to be here. We don't retire from being tribal. We just move that to the next generation. So that's what I have to say, and appreciate everybody's words. So thank you and take care.
Thank you, Chairman. Really appreciate your time and your thoughts. And you happen to be the 2nd supervisor from Lake County who's visited us on these listening sessions, because EJ came to talk a bit about the process of re-enrollment and all of that. So yeah, very great to have you both.
Thank you.
Dee Dee?
Kanapai. Mishish Uyakao. Kanapai Didi Matsunara Sibara. Kaarum Shanama Duratayo Walone. Good evening. My name is Didi Matsunara Sibara. I'm the tribal chairwoman of Rumsen Ama Duratayo Walone. And I have a couple issues that I wanted to bring up tonight. A while back, I went to visit the Paris monument that is set up near where the original Indian school was prior to Sherman Indian School, because I had heard that the monument was damaged. So I contacted the mayor of the city of Paris. I went out there and I looked at the monument, which it does need some work. He assured me that they're going to be rebuilding that monument and constructing something difficult, different out there that would be difficult for the sun to damage, and something that would be a little bit more appropriate. I asked him if he would try to include some native people from the area, maybe that would make it a nicer monument where they could have the families come out there and maybe sit and relax and maybe put some prayers down for their families who were there at the original site. So he said they're working on something and they will keep in touch with us. Well, after that, I went out to the Lake Paris Indian Museum. And when I went out there, I was really, really disturbed by the museum and the condition of the things that were on display in there. This, I believe, is a state-run museum. And they had a golden eagle, some other birds of prey, owls, and hawks that were severely, damaged from mites, feathers falling off, hanging. They've been on display there for years and not been taken care of. It was really sad, the condition of these exhibits. And I spoke to the gentlemen there that were, in charge of the museum there. They don't know anything about our history. They know nothing about what's on display there. They're basically there to sell the couple of books and pamphlets they have there for cash only. They can't tell you anything about anything in the museum there. It's really, really sad. If this is supposed to be a museum for our people, I would think that it would be somebody that would be able to tell people. This was a busy weekend out there at the lake. There were people there coming in and out. The people that were with me, we were talking and kind of telling people about things there as they came in and out. We sang a few songs. People were interested in what we were saying. And we actually picked up one of the eagle feathers that was on the floor, and they called the police on us. And after they tried to take it away from us, we had one woman who was from a federally recognized tribe. She was Lakota. She wouldn't give that feather up. And she wanted them to give her a citation, which they wouldn't. Finally, they agreed to let her keep it because they were basically probably going to just throw it in the trash like they told us they've done with others. It's really sad, and it makes me wonder how many other state museums are in the same condition. And I believe that's something that has to be looked into. I don't know if there's somebody that does monitor these museums, but that was really disturbing to me. And also, in last year on July 18th, we did a walk from Sherman Indian School to the Sherman Indian Cemetery, and we had well over 100 participants. Even some of the runners from Tule River, some of the people that had been to Sherman Indian School came down. We had some people, some families that had people that were deceased there at the cemetery send us messages, and we had people come and participate. So we wanted to let people know that this year on July 17th, we'll be doing the second annual walk. It's a little over 5-mile walk from the school. Last year we did a caravan because of COVID, but this year we want to do a walk. So we'll be putting out more information on that. And it's just a remembrance until we get these people home, get them back to where they belong and out of that cemetery, that really, find out who they are and find out if there's a way to get them home, make sure they're all accounted for. So those are the things that I wanted to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think we've actually been thinking about how this council can go and do something at Sherman Indian and kind of learn more. And then also, how, so I may have mentioned to the feds when this report was coming out that would be a perfect spot for them to come and look at what's happening in California and how there's still boarding schools operating that are underfunded, look like they haven't been tended to since the 70s, but you have these like beautiful, happy, like Native kids all connecting and in community, but also like it's still not being, tended to. And, we can't just acknowledge what happened before. We have to continue to take care of our kids and make sure they understand that they are a priority, that we do take care of them, that, it means something, that this school has turned the page on something like that and has done a little bit of reconciliation on its own. But so this could be an opportunity, or maybe there's a future one for us to kind of coordinate some of those pieces, and maybe do something around that walk too, and maybe get you some kind of shiny participants too.
That would be great, because one of the things, it's right next door to Cal Baptist, which is beautiful. The grounds, are just so green and so beautiful. And then you look at Sherman, and I mean, it is horrible. You might as well keep the kids on the res, because it looks exactly the same as some of the reservations across the country. And it's like, why are you bringing them off of a res to look just like a res? I mean, there is so much that needs to be done there to beautify, and they work hard. They try to keep it up, the kids, when they're there, but so much more could be done, with the area.
Well, and even it's, that museum that's even on there, like,
Yes.
should be like an amazing bit, and it's just like a tiny little.
Right,
So.
right. That'd be great.
Good. And then I've taken a note that to flag this for state parks, because that Lake Paris Museum, it is run by state parks. And what happens is it's kind of like Caltrans, where you have like regionally, there's different types of management. And so some places you have, like a co-management agreement with UROC, for example, where it's like this amazing visitor center that is so representative of the people there. And then in other places, it's like what you just mentioned, where it's like either there's no Native presence, or there's like a weird kind of representation of Native presence, but especially down there where there's so many tribes around Lake Paris, but then also so many Native people that live like right in Riverside, because they went to Sherman and then met, their family there. So it seems like a really missed opportunity to have that be kind of the exposure that people have to Native people. Fred?
Yes, this is Fred. I have one comment. After listening to the people speak, again, always so many sad stories. I've heard it for how many generations now? So many sad stories. And it becomes almost like this feeling that we know that it's the law, these laws now that were passed to murder us. Why can't we make a movement to go to the Supreme Court and knock on their door and demand justice? That is what these people want. Restitution. Can we do that together? I know that's what everybody in this room would love to see, justice, and wants it so bad it hurts. We want to give it to them in our lifetime. Can we use this? Will we be able to ever receive justice? And we have to get him now while he has so much money, that $100 billion surplus. He has money to pay us too. And it just seems so like a fight, to continue to do this and I guess beg. And I don't like to do that, but I just will bring it up. I know it's happening. My grandmother, she was the one who raised me, and she was a tribal treasurer for 17 years. And I watched how she worked, talking to all the attorneys, the business people, the tribe. And we'd watch those murder mystery shows. And one of the traits there that a murderer, he loves to do is just hold his people hostage. He doesn't like to let them escape. He likes to keep them right there and just watch them, like how I watch all you on the Zoom right now. He liked to watch us too. Just like that. And he knows that laws protect him. he can get away with murder. There's nothing that we could do. And I know everyone's scared because we are victims. We're all victims of murder, kidnap, rape, theft, exploitation. We shouldn't be afraid because we are the victims. And I really hope that in time we can unite together and really go knock on the Supreme Court's door, because, you know, we could get attorneys, we could get funding too to do that. If that's, I know that's what we really want to do here. And I really want to push hard for something like that because I'm so tired of hearing your sad stories. It's not good. It's not healthy. We need to progress, and to progress, we need justice. Justice. I hope it comes out of here. I really do. I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to get into some updates just for folks that are new to get up to speed, and then also some of the updates that we announced. And if you were here yesterday, it's going to be very similar, but there may be some differences. And if folks have questions based on what we talked about yesterday, you can also jump in there. Again, I will skip through the principles of meeting since we've already started kind of getting into the conversations. But again, as we move forward, please just, if you're feeling like you're getting angry or you feel like there's some thing that you wanted to address, I think just take a beat and just think about how to bring it into this space so that we're not kind of creating lateral trauma or coming away from this meeting feeling anxiety or feeling a certain way. I think most people who have taken the time to come here on an evening are trying to do the right thing. So I think as we work with each other, let's try to be generous with each other. Again, comments in the chat, questions in the chat are fine. And again, we are moving, but we're trying not to move too quickly so that we don't you know, forget about folks or as people get interested in the process, so that we make sure that everybody is engaged as needed. And then again, as there are opportunities like what Dee Dee flagged, and I think Kathy flagged, please let us know, because those are opportunities for us to even reach out to the conveners of those events and even have sort of affiliate events, have opportunities for recording oral histories to the extent that that is something that people want to do in the context or as like part of the things that are happening, and are also things that we can let our media affiliate partners know in case there's, you know, something that we could be amplifying as a story of healing, as a story of spotlighting something that really needs attention from the broader public. I think if we're going to make really meaningful change, we're going to need the buy-in of everybody, just because there's the democratic process also means that the things that we all agree on in this room aren't necessarily universally shared. And for us to be able to get bigger things done under this construct, we're going to need a lot of buy-in and a lot of support. And again, as many of you have mentioned, a lot of resourcing. And so that's going to be through the state, through the federal government, but also through private funders who are going to feel like this is a worthy cause and a restorative opportunity that I think everybody who lives in California and has benefited from being in California should be doing on their own accord. But just putting that out there that this is going to need to be a joint effort. So I'm going to very quickly share my screen, and I will try to talk very quickly because I want to make sure that there is a little bit of time for additional comments. Okay,
All right,
so
that's good.
thank you. So here's our overview and updates. And again, this photo is generously donated to us from my Chief Deputy Loretta, who is out on leave currently, but was taken in the ancestral homelands of California tribe on the North Coast. And so we try to promote those kind of things throughout the work and make sure that we are elevating the native spaces that we all call home. So I'm going to breeze through these. Again, we ask for respectful engagement. We do ask that folks do not make personal attacks or allegations within the context of these conversations, for the basic purpose too of, I think a lot of people who join these conversations don't necessarily know the background, the context, and may not have been with us for the entire time. And we want to make sure that we are not creating a space where kind of bad energy can be taking place, and where folks that have taken their time and generously offered to help us in this work are not also being attacked. But then also where I think one thing about this work is it has been from the beginning a project of California Native people and led by Native people. And so we don't want people who are signing up to help do something that has never been done in the history of California in this fashion. We want to make sure that they're able to engage with this work in a way where they don't feel like they're also being kind of traumatized. And really, we want this to be kind of a collective effort toward healing. So today we're going to have an overview of the council and its charge. We are going to have a quick overview of what hybrid quarterly council meetings will look like. And again, the council is required to do quarterly meetings. If there are things that come up that make it seem like it should be meeting more often, or whether there should be a convening like around, say, the Sherman Indian School Walk, we can do it a bit more frequently and do the pacing a bit differently. I think we're more concerned about having convenings that have the most impact for the community and the most access to the community versus convenings where we're kind of forcing a process that people are not ready to come to yet. That said, too, pacing, if we need more time and the community needs more time to kind of warm up and get into this work, we can also allow for that too and amend the executive order to allow more time. We'll also talk about the California Truth and Healing Fund, the UC Opportunity Plan, and the Great Scholarship Fund, the May revision, and that's the budget adjustments that happened just that were just announced and proposed on Friday. And then we'll go into some of the subcommittees and issue area task force proposals. So the Truth and Healing Council is a California Native American-led initiative that aims to clarify the historical record of the relationship between the state and California Native Americans by bearing witness to, recording, examining existing documentation of, and receiving California Native narratives in the spirit of truth and healing. It's led and convened by me and my office and governed by a governing council of California Native American leaders, and can also include additional non-voting representatives from California Native American tribes, relevant state and local agencies, and other relevant non-governmental stakeholders. And we're envisioning, if there are issue area task forces, which a couple are already kind of forming organically, that we'll want the people who are kind of leading those task forces to also be included as non-voting members of the council generally. So what does the council do? It will submit a final written report of findings to the governor's office by 2025. And that should reflect a holistic understanding of the historical relationship between California Native Americans and the state. The report can also make remedial recommendations and consider how to prevent similar depredations or policies in the future. Recommendations will be considered and adopted or developed by the council in real time, and they can be recommendations to improve policy, legislation, or funding for California Native people. The proposed approach is that the task forces will propose recommendations. So they'll do the kind of historical findings and then also create recommendations and submit those to the deliverables subcommittee for them to vet, and then final approval will go to the governing council. So in real time, that means, like, let's say we have the education task force is led by a couple people on this call and maybe a couple more people. We will, with those task forces, either go seek funding to help do that work, or we'll find a partner organization that can help do that work, that will help get them, help them to secure funding. And then those task forces will help kind of do those discrete issue areas, similar to the Tribal Law and Order Act process, if anybody remembers that from back in around 2010. where there was a lot of listening. There was a lot of similar to this, but also a bit more direction and a bit more issue area expertise so that there could be kind of that back and forth of policy development. And then again, Tribal Law and Order Act resulted in some of the protections for Indian women under VAWA and other similar legislation and funding. So public can participate with everything. How we envision this is being similar to kind of the international mechanisms like the United Nations, where, you know, the main meeting is happening, but around that meeting are a lot of side events and side meetings where people can plug in, learn more, and experience the full experience of what's going on in Indian country on both, you know, the bad side of it, where there's more that needs to be done, but then also looking at areas of hope where pilot projects or projects that tribes have been doing for some time are really successful. So, you know, for example, we're already in conversations about a convening in San Francisco in August-ish, where we're also thinking about what are places around San Francisco that would be good stops. You know, is it the newly opened Cafe Ohlone? Is it, you know, some of the trail systems that have been renamed? Are there different tribes that people should take the opportunity to go see? And also, you know, where are places, or is it, you know, visiting with people at Hastings and kind of understanding that process of truth and reconciliation as well that's going on right now. So if that's just kind of a plug of, if you're in San Francisco and you're interested in hosting an affiliate event, or you'd like to help build out the agenda, we are open and willing to discuss with you. And we'll also be hopefully finalizing a date for that in the next week or so, next month or so. And same thing, I think I'm going to start seeing about possibilities for July and see if there's any way we can tack on to the event that was announced. So if there's anything that people are thinking about around that, would love to have a conversation as well. Because we know too, there's also the, you know, the Veterans Cemetery there that has the Native statue that just was installed. High number of Native veterans in that space as well, and just want to make sure that we're having some good impact in different locations. And the more that this council can get to, the more coverage that is in the context of the report, but also in the context of live stream and all of the work of the council, and also areas of impact. We know Riverside has a really large population of Native people. We know that San Francisco and similarly Los Angeles and other urban areas have pretty large concentrations of Native people just because of relocation policies, because of wartime policies and the like. We're also in the process of tribal consultation. And so if we haven't yet met with your tribe, we're happy to meet. If we've already met with your tribe, we're happy to meet again. And I'm happy to come meet with you in your ancestral homelands or your tribal office as well. And just for awareness for people who are a little bit worried about COVID, we have a requirement to do testing on a weekly basis in the governor's office. And then when I travel, I test both before I fly and then after I fly before meeting with tribes. And I'm happy to be masking as well. So for folks that would prefer an in-person meeting so that we can kind of get to know each other in a more native way, I'm happy to come and visit you all. We're also seeking oral histories, and particularly from elders. We've just, we're in the process of waiting on the state contracting, or not contracting, but procurement to get a number of iPad Pros, where we're hoping to have lending libraries regionally, and probably going to be working with some of the Cal states so that they can just have them. If you want to come and do an oral history on site, you can come and do it in a place that is kind of self-contained and have some help with IT and things, but basically would be able to come with whoever you want to interview you, or ask for someone to interview you and be able to come and do that, you know, without us having to go to every single spot, and make sure that if you're more comfortable kind of doing it in a self-contained way, you can do that on your own, and we'll provide all of the things that you need. We're also going to be having oral history reporting opportunities aligned with our regional listening sessions. So For example, for the San Francisco, we'll basically find a partner where we can set up for maybe a day or two, and people can sign up for different time slots to be able to do oral histories if they're interested in doing that. So we're hoping to do, in addition to, if you're ready to have an oral history coming to you, also having it aligned with as the council travels for hearings and for meetings. So the council is doing regular regional meetings and hearings. They have a minimum of quarterly meetings, but as I mentioned, if there are opportunities that arise where we can kind of plan out something around different events that they should be aware of, we are open and willing to do that too. Also, if there are times when it doesn't feel like, you know, there's 3 days of programming, but maybe there's one thing that people should come and hear more about, like there was a specific massacre at the site, or there's a specific person that was, you know, just an amazing person, and this is where they gathered and this is where they created something, we can do that as well. And then they'll have business meetings aligned with those hearings and the council meetings as needed to kind of make sure the work moves forward. This is what the March hybrid meeting sort of looked like. And we started with some optional side events on the day before, and then the meeting itself started and was over 2 days with a morning listening session, talking circle, facilitated discussion and reflection. And then the afternoon having more kind of side events and opportunities to go visit places. So for example, like if we were saying a Riverside visit, like, is it that people are going to go see, you know, the museums in the area, go check out the Sherman Indian Museum, which has like all of these amazing records and things and binders, and that would be something that would be probably part of that kind of afternoon. And then the next day would be more of like the testimonial. So if there were tribes, if there were, you know, just leaders in the area that wanted to talk about what happened in that area or a specific thing, or have kind of a specific testimonial about the history of like Sherman, for example, that would happen during that morning. And then again, in the afternoon, there's opportunities for side events as well. We're kind of open to how to the layout. So like if there is, weekends are better. So for example, I saw that walk is on a Sunday, and that might actually work better for people. If that's better, we're happy to work around what's already happening in the community, because I think it's easier for the council to come to the community than it is for the community to come to the council. And we just want to make sure that everybody is, you know, able to fully engage in the way that they want to engage. And if there are events that are already kind of inspiring these kind of conversations, like we know there's a genocide conference that happens, I think annually, that could be good to partner with. I think, again, nobody wants to reinvent the wheel, and we don't want to be kind of inflicting trauma over and over and over. So if there are things that cause reflection, we're happy to plug into that as well. These are just questions that we send to the tribes. And then again, regional hearings, if you have any like specific instances, like there was something major that happened in your area, or if there's some big thing that you're doing now to promote healing that you think could be replicated throughout the state and could be replicated at scale, we can come and visit you there too. So now I'm going to talk really quickly about the Truth and Healing Fund, and it is administered by Decolonizing Wealth Project, but is basically.
Real quick, Christina, sorry, we have a few questions on the chat. If you don't
Okay.
mind. First question is from Arlene. She asks if there's a task force that addresses urban native issues in California.
So I have not seen that, and I actually added that on the list today of task forces that we should be proposing to the council to adopt, because again, as we mentioned yesterday, we don't want to have inequity between rural and urban, given that there's so many of our people in urban areas. So I think that's something that we do want the council to adopt. And we will write down that you are interested in joining as well. And then I'm looking, okay, Robert. And then Shelley, I think we would love to have a conversation about all of this. And I know there's been some land back and conservancy efforts happening in that area too. So would love to work with you to kind of think about how to get more amplification and more eyes on that. Okay, and then Destiny, totally agree. I think we need to have the urban Indian, and that's one where I think it's like, it's kind of like the status and identity where it's both a lens. So it needs to be applied across all of the issue areas like justice, health, all of that stuff, but then also is a focus because there's a unique history there. So it would be both its own section within the report, but then would also be running throughout all of the sections. And Robert, this actually looks like perfect timing. So we will reach out to you in fall or winter when it's freezing in a lot of places in the state, but not so bad down in San Bernardino. The Oral History Project. Oh, that would be great. Okay, we will reach out to you. And then the recordings, we have a framework where if they're submitted through the council, they are technically public records, and so they could be utilized as public records. On the front end, I think if you don't want it to be submitted like to the state for this, we just need to have an understanding, because if you want to have the recording for your tribe, for your family, for your community, that's fine with us too. And we'll just kind of figure that out on the front end and make sure that, you know, that's clear so that we're not putting something into the record that you would prefer not to have as part of the record. The idea here, I think, is to have transparency of the experiences and the real fullness and richness of experience of California Indian country, both from the perspective of, I think, elders, but also from their recollections of what happened back to their grandparents and great grandparents as well. And one thing we've been talking to a potential intern that we hope to have, who is also from California Indian country, from a non-fed tribe, is she talks a lot with her grandpa to learn a lot more about how his experiences were and the culture. And we'd like to even have, assuming we bring her in, her actually model what that would look like so that we can have that kind of intergenerational transmission while we're collecting the oral histories. Especially given with COVID and the overlay of what's going on right now, we'd love for people to keep it in the family, be able to have also that in-person interaction as kind of a gift. And then also to the extent that you'd like it to be publicly available, let us know. And then we'll reach out, Arlene, because I think that maybe we just kind of have an arrangement where we can give you some of the technology to record. Malky Museum, we'll add that to the list. And then Indian education programs. If you could send us like even a little bit more detail on that, we can add that to the education subcommittee. I don't think that's off the table, and that looks like something that is actually like really ripe for this council to be looking at. I think that there's also, just in the context of federal funding, not a lot of flexibility or evolution in a way that is creating a lot of tensions in Indian country. So, for example, with disenrollment, those kids are still Indian, and so how are they not getting education services from the feds, which are tied to Indians and tribes? Because, well, we won't go into all of that because I'm having to rush a little bit. But I think that should actually be, we'll make a note that that should be a topic in that discussion. And then I think the bigger thing that I'm touching on is that even federal funding formulas are based on things that don't really work in Indian country, like on reservation housing, and who, like families that live on reservation, when California tribes are actually providing services to like all of their members, many of whom live out of state, many of whom live in urban areas. And how is it that we have such an inflexible federal funding formula that, tribes are now having to face tough decisions because of not getting much from the federal government who still has an obligation. And that's just federally recognized tribes. So again, all of this is really good and really good suggestions, and we'll put this into those subcommittee and work groups. That's great. Great. We would love to connect with all of these folks, with the Native Museum professionals too. And maybe we can reach out to them to help assist the ATALM, is that it? Association of Tribal Libraries and Museums. Universities will not have the recordings. They'll just have the technology. Basically what we'll talk with them and we'll have in the agreement is like, they'll be there just to make sure that people are okay. All of the technology is ours. Like it's the state's, it's not theirs. And so they won't have the recordings. They'll either be uploaded directly into the cloud or they'll be on those actual iPads, and we'll be getting that stuff. We'll figure out a path so that if you did not want to have it come through the state or be on like a state server, it can go in a place that's not state while actually still being able to use the technology. So universities will not have the recordings. Yes, Agua Caliente's brand new museum and spa, which it looks like it's almost done too. I was just down there and it looks like it's getting there. Okay, perfect. I think I answered a lot of questions, and then Ken has a raised hand.
Well, I heard a lot of good things, but I haven't heard anything about gun recognized tribes. There's a lot of things going on, but we're not part of it. So my question is, what's for us? Besides telling our stories, talking about the bad things, which we had nothing to do with, that was put upon us by the state. We don't get no funding to a school. We don't get nothing. We don't even have a reservation or a rancheria. We don't even have a tribal office. I mean, yeah, might sound like I'm whining, but that's the facts. When I see my people dying from diabetes, living in 1930 farm worker housing, and you're talking about museums. I'm talking about right now, right here, today. I mean, if you want to see pictures of my people, I have no problem showing you them, as long as they're okay with it. But I talk to my people. There's nothing we get. There's nothing, and we're not asking for handouts. We're asking for something the state has taken from us. They took a tribal government and destroyed it. Then they created a tribal government out of the ones they destroyed, put them on rancherias and reservations. We still lived in our village till the 1980s. Public Law 280. Lucky we still have a allotment land. I was able to use Public Law 280. I'm sitting here, we are recognized at a federal level, but as individuals. Who did this to us? I don't think the federal government did it to us. Their mandates, the requiring recognition, are crazy. We have the documents, but they turn around and say, well, an allotment land was given to an individual. Those schools were given to individuals. They were taken from a tribe, and that tribe was not destroyed. We're still here. I know of several tribes that don't even know about this truth and healing. And they're like, well, it's just another ploy the state's doing. But I'm hoping and kind of wishing that more can be done. Instead of talking about museums, talking about our ancestors, I'm talking about now. When I have relatives losing legs because of low quality of food, housing, which they could be kicked out at any moment. We need land. We need somewhere to start. That's, I'm talking reality. It's not a sad story. It's a terrible story that I'm talking about. When a child's ripped from their parents and then they try to adopt that child away to some family that has nothing to do with it. When these children didn't even speak English and they were beaten for it. We know the stories, but these are in my lifetime. I know these stories. They were handed down by my elders to me. And that's the terrible part is don't feel sorry for us. Do something about it. It's well beyond time. 2020, budgets bulging, state cannot keep up with the other states that have state recognition. Even a proclamation, anything from the governor, not county, city, but step in the right direction. Then we can work on the next level. We'll give you our history, but that'd be confidential because we don't want, just like that, whoever that person was speaking, we don't want it out there in public. We don't want, people to feel sorry for us. We just want justice. It's the ill-begot gains of this state have destroyed us. And the recreation of tribes has hurt us. So this is what I'm hoping for, that, we're getting more out of this than education, museums, gatherings. We've been doing this for decades upon decades, and we're still not seeing. And we're voters too. We pay taxes. We don't have a tribal government controlling our lives. A lot of tribal government says if you're not on the reservation or Rancheria, you don't have no voting rights. I even had an uncle that was removed because he had to move off, take care of his mother and his wife who had cancer. Then they realized they made a mistake and they put him back on. He was tribal chair for over 30 years. So he did a lot for the valley. But then, he couldn't help us because everybody's at the goodwill of the tribe and the tribal council and the membership. So we're talking about a lot of good things here, but when is it going to become reality? We need it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And I think you've brought up some really good points. I think that all of it is related though, because I think, with all of it, we know that people in our communities have been talking about this for centuries. We know that people in our communities have been fighting for this for decades. We have people in this call that have been, since they were young, they're now elders, have been fighting for this type of thing. And I think, the difference is, you have people going to the Paris Museum and that's how they learn about Native people. And so they literally don't know anything. And they you can say that that is their fault and that they should be more educated, but we live in a system that educates people to believe that Indian people don't live here and that they're not here anymore and no one was at fault. And that when gold was discovered, there's no mention of Indians having been here at all. And so, education has to be a critical piece of this because the people who have the power right now are educated in a way that they don't view us as even existing. And to the extent that we do exist, it's as casinos. And so what people are seeing and filtering is really flawed and does not help in an understanding of the same things that you were talking about, that we have people who are have been completely deprived of everything and are still fighting for it and are not being seen because people don't actually have the lens to see them. And so that's part of what this is. And I think, with the issues that you were talking about too, I think it's easier to get things done if we can have a report that says, these are the issues, this is how you solve them, and that's how people can't ignore it. And so, that's why we want to have someone lead that effort on non-federal recognition, on things like, not having membership, not having the rights that tribes have or the opportunities that tribes have, so that we can get those, not just including folks from those tribes or not tribes in opportunities as they arise, but also thinking about how do we actually once and for all try to fix this in a way that makes sense for everybody and feels right. And so I hear you. I think everyone in this meeting hears you, but I think again, there's probably 99% of the population in California doesn't even know that any Indians are here. And so it's a very steep learning curve that's going to take a lot of concerted effort. I know we're at time. I do want to, for the folks that weren't here yesterday, touch on a couple of things because there are opportunities. As I mentioned, the 100 million for land is non-federally recognized tribes would be eligible for that once that criteria is created. There's also going to be a mechanism for allocating those funds, assuming that they do make it into the budget. That mechanism will be inclusive of non-federally recognized representatives. So if you're interested in being an active voice in that space, we will keep you posted. So I'm going to very quickly go through some of these things. The Truth and Healing Fund is all decisions and all direction are made by this advisory body, which is Chairman Maccaro, Vice Chair Myers, Councilmember Kessler-Mata, and then we brought in two outside folks from Indian country who can help kind of bring their knowledge, bring their expertise, and that's Erica Costa and Chad Lowry. Both of whom Erica represents tribes in private practice and is also Pomo and Wailaki from Sherwood and Round Valley tribes. And then Chegg is many tribes and is both an educator, but also is one of the only California Native people that have created a fund responsive to individual needs. And so will be very helpful in shaping this fund in a way that is inclusive. I'm going to very quickly share my screen or not share and then reshare to explain some of the other opportunities that have been announced. Okay, so here's the Truth and Healing Fund. Michael, I think will put the link in the chat, but again, I've already explained all of this, but currently it's eligible to California Native American tribes, which is both federally recognized tribes and non-federally recognized tribes, but they have to be a 501c3. If they're not a 501c3, they need to work with a 501c3. And that's just because of the structure of the fund itself. It's also open to California Native-led 501c3 nonprofit organizations, coalitions, or projects fiscally sponsored by a 501c3 based in California. Native-led is defined as the organization's board of directors and executive leadership are a majority California Native-led and must primarily serve California Natives. And so that's like if there's like, you know, a cultural consortium that does language development for a number of tribes, that would be eligible for these kind of funds. Individuals are not eligible, but that doesn't mean that a 501c3 or a tribe could not apply. And this is what's envisioned is that, you know, let's say tribe A says, hey, we want to be able to give individuals, you know, funding for them to actually do, you know, travel, do all of the things for this, or to engage in their own filmmaking, something like that. They could have their own program that is basically a pass-through to individuals. Funding has to be for charitable purposes and can't be used for efforts in opposition to other tribes or tribal entities. So to the extent that you're seeking funding to fight another tribe, you can't do that. And then grants right now will range from 5,000 to 50,000. And the priorities will be shifting over time. So they can, right now it's for efforts to spread awareness and increase community engagement of California Native Americans in the process of the council. So it will prioritize statewide and regional organizations and coalitions that can provide awareness, community engagement, or logistical capacity support to engage with the council. Logistical or capacity support to attend and engage in the council meetings and hearings. So let's say we have that meeting in San Francisco. If people need transportation, need parking, need lodging and childcare, or want to secure meeting space to host a side event, affiliate with the Truth and Healing Council can do that too. Efforts to bring together California Native Americans intra or intertribally to discuss, plan, or otherwise prepare for engaging in the council process, or to engage in independent truth and healing work with and among tribes. So if you and your tribal consortia want to do a similar thing like Susquehanna has been doing for a while, you could do that as well. And then tribal history, research, narrative work that supports the goals of the process. So you can also do your own reporting and keep that within your tribe using this funding source. Capacity building for tribes. You could also research and plan to support native land back efforts. But again, funding cannot be used for efforts in opposition to other tribes or tribal entities. So if you're trying to buy land that's within the ancestral homelands of someone else, probably not going to get funded. But if you are looking at a parcel that is very squarely within your ancestral homelands, or you have a checkerboard situation where you're just trying to consolidate, you could use that funding as well. And then can I see your raised hand, but I do want to get through these updates very quickly and then I'll call on you. And then support for traditional healing programs or efforts connected to tribal or intra-tribal truth and healing processes. So if there is, you know, a traditional, anything in your area that is connected to healing and kind of working through these kinds of traumas, that could be funded too. There are two deadlines for proposals. The first is June 15th, and the decisions will be announced by July. The second is September 15th with decisions by October. And you can apply by going to this link, www.justfund.us. And then all of the directions are in this website too. We have support webinars that are going to take place to walk you through the RFP process as well. So you can register here for the May 26th or the June 1st, or if you can't attend either, it will be available on the Decolonizing Wealth YouTube page, and we'll share it on our YouTube page as well and our blog. I'm going to quickly switch over to update you all on the UC Opportunity Plan. For those of you that weren't aware, there was an announcement made earlier this month that all tuition and mandatory service fees will be fully covered for all members of federally recognized tribes who are residents of California. That's not exclusive to California Indians. It's all members of federally recognized tribes. It's just baseline tuition and student services fees. Housing and all of that would be extra. And students who have financial need could potentially qualify for more, but will have to go through the financial aid process. For tribes that are already funding UCs, they can also take a look and see how they might want to reallocate to help some of those other things like, you know, professional organizations or housing and the like. I'm going to quickly then go over to the Grayton opportunity, which is an opportunity for California Native students from non-federally recognized tribes. And so they have, on top of the announcement by the UC, created a fund or a scholarship fund for California Native American students accepted into UCs as well. And I think Michael will put that link in the chat too. The details are not yet out, but we wanted to make people aware that this is kind of the complementary piece where California Native American students will also be able to access tuition free at the UCs. And very exciting and grateful to Grayton for announcing this. Theoretically, if something like this did work ongoing, this could be something that is funded by the Truth and Healing Fund as well, you know, in the context of reparations. I think state funding always has some constraints because of weird constitutional and legal issues. And so to the extent that there are recommendations about creating endowments, about creating funds, that could also be done through the context of the Truth and Healing Fund, which sits outside of state kind of constraints and would not have the same kind of issues. That fund also, to the extent that there are people looking to contribute to it, the goal is to raise 5 million. I think there's 500,000 in there right now, and to have that be an evolving fund that will then later respond to the recommendations. So to the extent that there is an ask of philanthropy, which philanthropy I'm saying as an inclusive word for private funding too. So for example, if there is something that says, hey, if the majority of your wealth was gotten because of the gold rush and the people who came here, and you're a company that still is in existence, you should probably be putting, 10%, 50%, whatever it is of your giving power into Indian communities in California, because you have basically benefited from a genocidal practice. That fund is directly for things like that. So right now it's more of a community engagement fund, but it will evolve into more of a restorative fund to help kind of catalyze and move those recommendations. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm almost done, and then I'll get to Ken. I wanted to share also, well, I don't have to share the budget because it's kind of long, but I wanted to share an update on the budget and just let you all know that there's a couple of items in there that are particularly important. There's the 100 million that is proposed for 30 by 30, which is conservation, but then also, conservation and then co-management and nature-based solutions. So the two are different things. A nature-based solution in Indian country translates to something like reintroducing beavers into your streams. It could be reintroducing low-grade burns to create prairies, like used to be done over time. It could be, I'll stop giving examples because we're out of time, but and then conservation is more like we're conserving this land for specific purposes. Conserving has like a bigger definition than it just means it can't be used for like certain economic development activity, but it means that like you could have a native-led conservancy in a place where you have a village site, for example, and have that be similar to kind of like Sinkione and that kind of structure. So that's the 100 million. Again, as I mentioned yesterday, yes, saving the salmon, saving the elk, that could all be part of things that could be funded out of that. The thing that's been highlighted the most is land back, because it could potentially be used for land purchase. But again, it can be used for kind of a lot of these things. If you want to have like reintroduce native plants and have a native kind of, well, I'll stop talking because I'm giving too much detail. But the process itself for the budget is the governor proposes the budget, and then it's a negotiation with the legislature about what finally ends up in the budget. So if there are things that you all particularly like, it's a good thing to let your legislators know that you like those things, because otherwise, if they don't think you like them and they don't feel like there's enough support, they might try to take that item out and then use it for their own policy priorities or the things that their constituents think are important. It's all very political. So if there are things like the 100 million set aside that you think are particularly good, it's good to let them know. There's also 15 million was put or proposed into the budget to basically finish and the construction and fill out the budget for the San Francisco Friendship House SF Wellness Center, which is basically both. It's a multi-level native informed, native led, California native primarily serving facility that will basically, I think, double the amount of native women that can live in with their families in the Native Women's Lodge, but then rooftop gardens with native plants, lots of youth elements, and then also Indian health facilities within the heart of San Francisco. So is intended to be part of Village SF, which is a native kind of cultural community. and will be a welcoming kind of Native informed healing cultural center in the city, and then also 15 million for a counterpart up in the North Coast that would be serving intertribal, or would be an intertribal satellite basically of the one in San Francisco. Those again are things that have been funded with the idea that if they work well, they're scalable and could be done in different areas throughout the state to be culturally informed wellness centers and villages throughout the state for Native people to access culturally competent services. There's also 12 million in the budget, which is 4 million over 3 years for a grant program for missing and murdered Indigenous women and people capacity building for tribes. So if a tribe says, hey, and just to back up, the Attorney General's office in California is doing a study on the status of being able to on the status of missing and murdered Indigenous women and people, and where the state, needs to be plugging in more, and is also providing technical assistance. And that is in process, and many of you have probably already engaged with that. This is kind of a complement to that, so that if there are tribes that already understand what their needs are and just want money, this is what that is for. So like, if you know that you need, these many more police vehicles, and you need these many more, I'm trying to think of something that's not really twisted, but communication systems and help with searching that you could apply for this and fund a program or create a program because of your needs. I think there's a few more things and I'm not remembering, so I will keep moving. And wanted to just give a quick update that the firm for the California Indian Heritage Center that will be built in West Sacramento has been announced, and it's Fentress Architects. And they have been selected and are kind of going through the contracting process, but there will be an opportunity for public engagement in the next couple of months. So we'll let you all know about that. And then I just wanted to make folks aware, and I know we're over time, but I think this is important for people to see. And if people have questions, you can always reach out to me on the side. There is a process for pardons in California to the extent that you have something on your record and you are trying to run for tribal office, or you're trying to run for another type of office, or you're trying to be appointed to a commission that has confirmation, and you have this thing on your record that you did when you were young and that probably thought you were having a lot of fun, or didn't really think about the fact that you might be an adult someday. But so there is a process for pardons, and we do take requests from Indian country very seriously, in that we prioritize them and we try to do the best we can, because we do hear from folks who, they are now in their adult lives. They did something stupid when they were 17 or 18. And now they want to be an ICWA family, but they have something on their record that's preventing them from adopting their kids. We hear of other issues where people are trying to enter into business contracts or trying to run for tribal office and want to be able to run, but they're prevented because of something in their tribe's constitution, or they're prevented because the financing or the partner doesn't want to see a record. If you go to the site gov.ca.gov/pardons, it looks complicated, but it's not. And we can walk you through this if this is something you'd like to do. It's very confidential, the whole process, and it does get, I believe, announced in a regular kind of release when it's done. But the whole process is confidential. And so folks should not feel ashamed about reaching out, because it can open up a lot of opportunities, especially for folks who want to be running for school boards and things like that, and getting, more into these spaces. But you basically submit a pardon application to the governor's office, and we can help provide technical assistance. And then you submit a notice of intent to apply for clemency. And so again, if you're interested, I would recommend that you reach out to us, and then we can put you in touch with the clemency team at the governor's office, because they're very helpful, very empathetic, and will help kind of guide you through that process. And the earlier you do it, the better, because it does take a little bit of time. And right now, while we are hopeful that the governor will be around for a few more years, it is governor to governor. So what tends to happen is people kind of stack up applications when the governor's on his way out, and then that makes it pretty challenging. But if you have things that you're thinking about on the front end, that's much easier. So I apologize for talking so much. Let me just very quickly look at my slides because I think there were a few more things. Okay. Those are less important. If you're interested in joining a subcommittee or a task force, or you have ideas about people who might be good for task forces, and I'll just go through the task or the subcommittees now. Please reach out to us. We are keeping track. Some of this needs to go through the governing council. So it's stuff that we still need to have a process for. And so that's why it takes a bit of time. But we are keeping track of all of you who've already told us. So don't feel like you're getting snubbed. It's just taking a little bit of time, especially as people are adjusting to in-person and hybrid and the like. But the subcommittees are academic partnerships, funding partnerships, the youth council, urban communities is a proposed one. We can change it too. Maybe it's urban community building, status and identity, education, and education I think is going to be both similar to, I think that's more of a task force, and then deliverables and elders. We're always seeking more elders. So if you're an elder and you want to come join the elders, please feel free to let us know. We do have quite a few people who have expressed interest, and we're very happy about that. And then the issue area task forces that we're proposing, these are just proposals. We haven't run this by the governing council yet, but something focused on broadly culture. So that could be language, it can be cultural practices, things like that, gathering, financial survivance. So that's really economic development, but we're trying to get away from more like capitalist Western concepts and more into like, what do people in Native communities need to be able to live and thrive? Education, safeguarding knowledges, and that's a new one that we put in this month, and it's really the concept that came up last month about as we move forward with, you know, things like what the federal government is doing on traditional knowledges, as we move forward with even asking you all for your stories, how do we make sure that those things are not being misappropriated and misused by people who are not from the community and who are basically taking your life experience, your knowledge as like one of the last surviving Native people from your community and using it for inappropriate purposes and without your knowledge or consent or benefit. So want to make sure that's an area of focus because that can actually have a deep dive into the idea of, you know, cultural intellectual property and what is the value of that in, you know, translated into Western culture, and how do we account for the fact that so much has been taken without reciprocity. One is wellness, so that's kind of health. One would be land and lifeways, and that's another thing where we're trying to get away from resource and that kind of extractive language and get to something that's more Native oriented. And then something that's one would be focused on kind of justice systems generally, and both looking at the history of how we got here, where, you know, justice systems in California are severely lacking, Native justice systems, but then also what are alternatives to Western justice systems that tribes have developed and have implemented that have actually created more community healing. So again, I appreciate all of you hearing me talk for a very long time. And Ken, I'll go to your raised hand.
Well, you said a lot. What I'm looking at is the land back. Talking about tribal territories. How does one justify their tribal territory? Because we're a trading tribe, so we went all the way everywhere. Ancestors buried in other cemeteries, other tribes that descend from us. I think you know what I'm getting at. It's how will, huh?
Yeah, it's a mess. The Native American Heritage Commission grapples with it on a daily basis. And I think
Yes.
this is actually something that the council that's going to be overseeing the fund at Resources Agency for, conservation, for nature-based solutions, that's exactly what they're going to have to grapple with. And if anyone has ideas about how that can be done in a way that doesn't kind of create a lot of problems and also doesn't air dirty laundry that's better left kind of taking place somewhere else and not in front of the state, because from the state perspective, I think, like from the do-gooder enviro perspective, it's like, here, you're welcome, here's a nice thing, and if they see that, like, weird stuff around it, they'll get scared. And so I think if all of you have ideas about how to ensure that transfers, which was brought up by one of our council members, are like kind of felt valid by the community, that are because we also have an ancestral lands policy, which actually encourages surplus lands to go to Native people in the area and their ancestral lands. And again, that's another one where like you've got like 13 tribes that all have the same ancestral lands because of how California played out, and relocation policies and mission systems and all of the things. So if people have ideas about how to do that in a way that feels like not performative, not cheapening like tribal integrity and sovereignty, and saying, well, why can't you all just get along? If there are things that could help with that process, I think that council would be very, or if you are on it, you'll be very happy to have the answers.
Well, that's the thing, is that's the first thing that came to my mind was, who decides what tribal area? Because right now we have a conflict between, we have 6 tribes around us, and 2 of them are saying that's their tribal area, but they're relocated, and really can't show ancestry back to any of the relatives. So that's where I'm at right now. Like I'm told, well, under Section 106, you can't say nothing. It's federal land, and that's the thing right there, is the state's going to have to do some sort of justification of tribal lands, because I have burials within other tribes along the trade routes, and that's what it really gets me, is like you have nothing to say about anything because you're not federally recognized. I go, well, this is state land, it's not federal land, so state has jurisdiction. So that's why I question how far how far has this land back gotten to, because I have records showing that within the treaty areas, the ceded land, also the reservation, what we're supposed to get, and the other tribes that are within the treaty signatures of 1851 and 52. Then we also had the treaty in 1856. So, and everything else was created after our 1930s, the rancheria and the reservation. And as far as I could tell, is none of the reservation was created for us, but we never attended it. We never went there. We got outside support from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or I don't know what you call them, the Army. But that's where I see an issue, is I guess maybe hooking it with the local tribe, because I can see right now the coastal Indians have no federally recognized tribe, but federally recognized tribe has jurisdiction over that on any federal property. I know they're in a very hard place because they have to ask permission under Section 106 if they find ancestors on any kind of government base, or land. And I have the same problem too, dealing with the Corps of Engineers. It's our ancestral land, but I don't have a say so. National parks, So that's where I just, I want to get to the land back, because I have a very good idea where there's a lot of land, excess land, and you're talking the right tune, a 50-50 partnership with the Conservancy, not a Conservancy and we're outside partners, because they'll get rid of us as soon as they can. That's just the facts. I've seen it done several times. They'll change the lock and you're gone. I mean, I see outside conservancies getting land in California that are from Pennsylvania. This has to be a California-led thing. Because, when I sit down, I look at all the conservancies in my area, they're basically two conservancies and they still have the same board of directors. It's the cousin of a sister of a brother. So that's what kind of gets, we need a maybe 60 to 40 Native American conservancy, because we don't have a history, we don't have a track record. This is new to us, conservancies, but we know how to take care of the land, just like you're talking about, indigenous plants, great idea. I've been looking at that for several years. There's a lot of excess land in California. We just don't know about it. And these excess lands need to be surveyed of what the possibilities are. And, also the schools, universities, when they had the school bonds back in the 1860s, 1870s, they're sitting on resources that they never even touch. I know in my area, there's 4 or 5 universities, Boston, they got school bonds to get these lands. So, yeah, I like to see what's on that board, but this is just my concerns. How are we going to distinguish, what lands, tribal lands, unrecognized tribes that have no federally recognized documents, but they still exist under Spanish records, that's the thing is we got to do this. I just see a lot of land available and I'm just looking at, 11,000 acres, that's in California. I'm going, oh my goodness, do I want to go for that? Even though it's not in my tribal area, but I am a descendant from the larger tribe, but the recognized tribe that's here says it's theirs, even though they're not from that tribal grouping. And I go, I can show ancestry back to that tribal grouping. So those are my concerns. How are we going to get through this? I already see issues already. I've been told issues, federal land, especially, state, they really don't have too much to say, but we can work together. There's always a promise of working together. Anyway, that's what I had to say. All the other stuff you said was good in between or after. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ken. And you're not wrong. And you are bringing up great points that I think need to get worked out. And I'll just respond to a couple things before I let everybody go. And if you need to go, you need to go. And this will be recorded. One thing is the National Park Service has actually reached out to think about how they can better work with non-federally recognized tribes in the state. So that is a good thing. And we'll be having conversations with them, which we hope will be fruitful. Hopefully we can have other groups follow suit. The second thing is that, did we lose Ken? Well, I'll just continue to respond and then we can, oh no, there he is, okay. The second thing is that the conservancy issue is actually something that we've been thinking about a little bit and is kind of a native conservancy that is kind of multiple tribes within the same ancestral territories could be a solution for tribes that are seeking to do conservancy work or 30 by 30 work and not have that kind of the disagreement about who gets what, but have kind of that happen once that is done and have that be kind of, done once all of the stuff on the state side is transferred over so that it's not kind of decided by the state who gets what. But if people have valid ties to the same areas, that could be something. And that potentially, with this fund too, could be something that is helped stood up by the California Truth and Healing Fund is, helping fund those Native-led conservancies that need to be created under certain, using certain processes. So again, it's gonna, and then one more thing I wanted to mention is that the surplusing properties issue is we have actual state buildings that have facilities, and so to the extent that there are state buildings that are kind of up for surplusing and people have them in areas where their tribes generally meet, we know that federally recognized tribes tend to have already offices, but to the extent that there are places on the coast in urban areas, in places where non-fed tribes have been displaced that might be of interest to tribes, or if they're of interest to federally recognized tribes or non-federally recognized tribes as kind of satellites for their urban populations or to kind of have community centers. we're completely open for that too. The only thing is with kind of our internal priorities, we prioritize housing, for example, and things like that. But to the extent that, you know, that's something that a tribe wants to engage in, I think could be beneficial. So it's after 8. I very much appreciate all of your, and I see in the comments, we're saving those as well. So those will be a part of the readout for this listening session. Really appreciate all of you sticking around until after 8. Again, please feel free to follow up if you have any questions, and we'll keep you posted as programming is developed. Again, if you have any events that you think could be a good kind of anchor for the Truth and Healing Council that you'd like the Truth and Healing Council to join, I know I think there's a big year coming up for Sonoma next year, so maybe we try to work around that too. And then I'll stop rambling. Would you like to have any closing comments, Councilmember Harper?
No, I think you've covered it well, Christina. Thank you.
Great. Again, thank you all for your time, and take care, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.